You ever feel like you're constantly performing? Like you've become a version of yourself built just to survive the expectations of the world? Well, what if I told you the most powerful thing you can do right now is disappear, not run, not hide, disappear from the noise, disappear from the personas you had to build to be accepted, disappear from the lie that your worth is tied to how seen, liked, or needed you are. Because sometimes the only way to truly become is to first disappear. You ever wake up and feel like you're already behind, like you're racing through a life that doesn't quite feel like yours, but you keep running because stopping feels like failure? That feeling, that quiet, persistent ache, is what happens when we've been living as someone we were never meant to be. From a young age, most of us are handed a script. Be the good child. Be the responsible one. Be the strong one. Be the funny one. We're told, both directly and subtly, what earns love, what makes us valuable, and what makes us acceptable. And because we're wired for belonging, we listen, we obey, we become. But somewhere in that becoming, we begin to disappear. We trade authenticity for approval. We swap realness for recognition. We tell ourselves it's survival, and maybe it was, but it's not freedom. And freedom is what your soul is aching for. The truth is, the world doesn't need the version of you that performs. It needs the version of you that is. That means disappearing from who you were told to be, not because that version was a mistake, but because it was incomplete. As incomplete. It was edited, filtered, and shaped to fit a narrative you never wrote. We're raised to believe that certain traits are acceptable while others must be buried. Sensitivity? Too soft. Anger? Too much. Vulnerability? Weak. So we start hiding parts of ourselves. We tuck them away in corners. We pretend they're not there. And over time, we don't even miss them because we've forgotten they existed. But the cost of that forgetting is staggering. We become strangers to ourselves. We look in the mirror and recognize the face, but not the eyes behind it. We're praised for how well we hold it together, but no one asks what it's costing us to keep holding. We need to unlearn the lie that acceptance comes from assimilation, that if we can just be more agreeable, more likable, more predictable, we'll be loved. That love, the real kind. And you can't be seen, if you're wearing someone else's skin. Disappearing from who you were told to be means peeling back the layers. It means saying no more to roles you never auditioned for. It means risking the discomfort of unfamiliar ground to reclaim the parts of you that never got a chance to speak. But make no mistake, this kind of disappearing is not about erasure. It's about emergence. It's not a vanishing act. It's a resurrection. You're not losing yourself. You're shedding everything that was never yours to carry. The perfectionism, the pressure, the people pleasing. You're letting it fall. Not because you're weak, but because you're finally ready to stand in your own strength. And that strength doesn't look like power over others. It looks like peace with yourself. So, yes, disappear from the expectations that keep you small. Disappear from the systems that only applaud you when you're performing. Disappear from the identity that was never yours to begin with. And in that space, in that brave, holy unraveling, you will meet someone you haven't seen in a long time. The real you. The wild, free, beautifully flawed version of you. The one that never needed to be fixed, only remembered. We've been told that power is loud, that it's in titles, platforms, and the number of people watching. But real power doesn't scream. It doesn't need to. And you only find it when you disappear from the noise, when you walk away from the places, the people, the patterns that keep pulling you away from yourself. The world is loud by design. It thrives on distraction. It wants your attention because attention is currency. But your attention is also your life. And where you place it determines everything. When you're constantly plugged in, constantly performing, constantly showing up for everyone but yourself, you lose touch. That deep, anchored voice that knows who you are and what you're here to do. It doesn't yell over the chaos. It waits. It whispers. And if you're too busy keeping up, you'll miss it. That's why disappearing isn't weakness. It's wisdom. It's reclaiming your most non-renewable resource, your energy. Every time you say yes when you mean no, every time you pretend you're fine when you're falling apart, every time you shrink your truth to make someone else comfortable, you leak power. And slowly, silently, you disappear from your own life. To reclaim that power, you have to get still. Not just physically, but spiritually. Still enough to hear your own breath. Still enough to feel what's real underneath the armor. This is the kind of disappearing that scares people. Because we built lives on noise, we've learned to equate busyness with worth and constant motion with meaning. But stillness isn't empty. It's where everything begins. It's in the silence that your real voice rises. It's in the quiet that the truth comes out, not the version of you curated for the world, but the version of you that knows what matters. And when you find that voice again, you don't just speak differently. You live differently. There's a reason so many of us feel anxious when we're alone. Because the second the noise stops, the feelings start. The grief we haven't named. The fear we've buried. The rage we've been taught to hide. But here's the thing. Your feelings aren't here to shame you. They're here to guide you. To show you where the pain still lives, where the boundaries need to be, where the healing is waiting. When you disappear from the noise, you finally get to hear the story your body has been trying to tell. And when you honor that story, you begin to write a new one. Disappearing is how you stop giving your power away. It's how you stop outsourcing your validation to people who don't even know your heart. It's how you stop measuring your worth in followers, feedback, or false narratives. When you disappear from that external chase, you remember that the only approval that ever mattered was your own. And when you start living like your own voice is enough, something shifts. You stop begging. You stop performing. You stop negotiating your value in rooms that were never built to honor it. And suddenly, everything that once had control over you doesn't. You don't need a spotlight to be powerful. You need presence. You need truth. And you need the courage to walk away from anything that requires you to abandon yourself to stay in it. That's what this kind of disappearing does. It doesn't erase who you are. It excavates who you've always been. Then, beneath the expectations, beneath the performance, beyond the noise, There is a you that remembers, a you that knows, and that knowing, that's your power. That's the place you lead from. That's the voice that doesn't need to be the loudest in the room because it carries the deepest truth. Words do not add ending also. Don't mention paragraph name, ChatGPT said. There's a version of you that's so real, so grounded, so alive. But you haven't seen them in a while. Not because they're gone, but because they've been buried under years of expectations, obligations, and identities you thought you had to wear to be loved. We've been taught that to be someone, we have to be seen. We've bought into this lie that visibility equals value, that the more eyes on us, the more relevant we are. And that's the moment you know. It's time to disappear. We say yes so quickly, out of guilt, obligation, fear of being seen as selfish. We convince ourselves that putting ourselves last is noble. But let's be clear, martyrdom is not love. Self-neglect is not kindness. Being everything for everyone comes at a cost, and that cost is you, your dreams, your voice. And when you go long enough without listening to your own voice, it becomes hard to recognize. You look up and don't know where you ended and where everyone else's needs began. That kind of disappearance, where you vanish beneath the weight of roles and responsibilities, isn't noble. It's devastating. And the only way back is to consciously disappear from what's draining you so you can return to what sustains you. Sometimes we confuse love with sacrifice. Sacrifice. But true love doesn't ask you to lose yourself. True love honors who you are, not just what you give. If your presence is only appreciated when you're producing, performing, or providing, then you are not being loved, you are being used. That realization stings. It rattles you, but it's necessary. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. And you begin to realize the love you've been giving away so freely is the very love you've been starving for. So you step back, not to punish anyone, but to heal the part of you that thought you had to earn your place in people's lives. Disappearing from codependency isn't abandonment. It's alignment. It's returning to center, to the truth that your needs matter, your boundaries are valid, and your time is sacred. You weren't put on this earth just to respond to the needs of others. You were meant to create, to grow, to feel, to be. And the more you disappear from the patterns that demand your self-betrayal, the more space you create for your authenticity. The world might not celebrate this kind of quiet rebellion, but your soul will. It will exhale. It will soften. It will rise. Some will call you distant. Others might guilt you, question you, try to pull you back into the patterns that served them. Your job is not to make others comfortable with your boundaries. Your job is not to make others comfortable with your boundaries. Your job is to protect the life force within you. That part of you that is sacred, irreplaceable, and tired of being stretched too thin. 2, when you disappear from the cycles that exploit your kindness, you remember what it feels like to rest, to breathe, to exist outside of expectation. And here's the truth. The ones who genuinely love you will adapt. They will honor your no. They will celebrate your wholeness. The others will fall away, and let them. You're not here to be everything for everyone. You're here to be everything to yourself, to stop showing up as a version of you who only exist to meet other people's needs. When you choose to disappear from the roles that have consumed you, what remains is someone real, grounded, and finally free. Someone who no longer needs to be needed to feel worthy, but knows, without question, that they already are. We live in a culture that rewards the mask, that praises composure, polish, and perfection. We're celebrated for how well we manage, how much we achieve, how effortlessly we appear to hold it all together. And somewhere along the way, we start confusing that performance for our identity. We start thinking the curated version of ourselves is the real one, but it's not. It's the armor. And while armor might keep you safe, it also keeps you separate from intimacy, from honesty. You can't build real connection behind a facade. You can't feel deeply while numbing what's real. That's why disappearing isn't about losing yourself. It's about shedding everything that was never really you to begin with. We've been taught that our value comes from doing, constantly striving, from achieving, producing, and outperforming. But your worth was never meant to be earned. It was always inherent. Somewhere deep inside, you know that. But it's hard to hear that truth over the noise of constant productivity. That's why you need to disappear. Not from the world, but from the machine that keeps convincing you you're only as good as your output. Disappear from the performance of success so you can remember what joy actually feels like. Disappear from the grind long enough to remember what it means to just be. Rest is not laziness. Stillness is not wasted time. You start to realize how far you've strayed when silence feels uncomfortable, when stillness feels like a threat, when the thought of being alone with yourself is more frightening than the exhaustion of overcommitment. But here's the truth. If silence scares you, it's because your soul has something to say. If stillness makes you restless, it's because there's healing waiting beneath the surface. That's why this kind of disappearing matters. It's not a retreat, it's a return. A return to the places within you that haven't had your full attention in a long time. And until you go there, until you disappear from the noise, you'll keep living in a version of yourself that looks whole on the outside. Feels hollow on the inside. There's a profound kind of transformation that can only happen in solitude, not isolation, solitude. The kind where you strip away every title, every obligation, every identity that isn't anchored in your truth. When no one is watching, when no one is asking, when no one is applauding, that's when your real self speaks. That's when the questions surface. Who am I when I'm not performing? What do I want that I haven't admitted? What outgrown, but keep holding on to? These aren't easy questions, but they're necessary because the answers will shape the next version of your life, the version that's not built on performance, but on presence. And presence isn't passive. It's powerful. It's what happens when you stop running and start rooting. Rooting into your values. Rooting into a life that actually feels like yours. This kind of life doesn't need to be flashy. It doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to be true. But you can't root into truth when you're tangled in roles, expectations, and masks. So you let it all go. Not all at once, but piece by piece. The perfectionism, the need to explain, the pressure to prove. You start trading all of that for peace. And slowly, you come home to yourself. That's why disappearing is not a breakdown. It's a breakthrough. It's the moment you stop chasing who you think you should be and start embracing who you already are. Not the version of you the world claps for. The version of you that can sit in silence and feel whole. That can choose. Rest without guilt. That can breathe. Without performing. When you give yourself permission to disappear from the story that demands your constant hustle, you start writing a new one. One where you don't have to prove your worth. One where you get to live it. Where the noise is no longer just annoying, it's unbearable. The chaos, the expectations, the endless input from people who don't even know your heart. And suddenly, it clicks. You've been building a life around things that don't feed you. You've been spending your time on people who drain you, pursuing goals that don't fulfill you, and pretending everything's fine when your soul is screaming. That scream isn't a breakdown. It's a call to come home. It's your truth demanding space. And the only way to answer it is to disappear from everything that keeps pulling you away from who you are. This isn't about vanishing. It's about discernment. It's about stepping back. Not because you're weak, but because you're finally strong enough to say, this is for me. This job, this relationship, this version of success.